Now to start us off, let's try to answer a question. What is the goal of recorded music? I know that's a really big and vague question that could make for its own video, and maybe it will.
Why am I doing this? I want y'all to know this video has been planned since I said that line in my vinyl versus digital video. I thought it'd be fun to do this cumulative, all-encompassing video on why recorded music even exists as my last real case study of the year. But the more I researched this, the more I realized This is such a big question. Recorded music has been around in some capacity for at least a century. It's gone through various formats, genres, artists, cultural shifts. It's been ingrained into how we consume music. And here I am, some dweeb with a YouTube channel, trying to figure out why it exists. But I do like a challenge. So for today's case study, I'm just joking about being so despondent. I'm actually pretty excited to get into this. So before we try to figure out why we record music, let's try to understand, one, why music exists in the first place, and two, why we record anything to begin with. Now those are huge questions that would make this video super long, so let's just try to set up some general ideas for both. First, why do we music? Yeah, that's the take I'm gonna use. The best answer I could find is that music serves as a way for us to communicate ideas and feelings through the phenomenon of vibrating molecules, or, in other words, wiggly air. However, music itself doesn't necessarily mean anything, or at least the parts of it don't. Adam Neely has a great video about the meaning of music. He, along with Leonard Bernstein, make the point that the individual elements of music don't really mean anything on their own. But when combined to form relationships between each other, then they form what we know as music, they gain meaning, and they allow us to communicate. Second, why do we record anything? Well, for many reasons. It allows us to understand where we came from, what we evolved from, how our cultures shifted and morphed, what ideas, concepts, skills, goods, dank memes we've shared between one another. In other words, communication on a massive scale between different cultures and generations. The common aspect of these two, music and recording in general, is communication. So it would make sense that recorded music is an extension of that desire or need to communicate. But what exactly does the recording process add? Well, let's go back to what Mr. Bernstein was saying.
If I play a note, one note all alone, that means nothing. It's just a plain old F sharp or a B flat. A sound, that's all.
Music depends on the relationship between its various components to generate any kind of meaning. So the practice of recording and mixing is, in some sense, the practice of capturing and balancing each component in a song to fully realize its potential meaning. Though this balancing act started out as just a way to make sure early recordings didn't sound terrible, it eventually grew into an artistic process of its own. Recording the art form is itself an art form. Does the drum kit provide an engaging beat? Is the vocalist able to be heard? Does the shaker have to be drenched in reverb and automated to pan back and forth for the entire song? Yes, always to that last one. But was that always the case? Let's go back and find out.
From humble beginnings.
The first machine to record and reproduce sound was the phonograph, developed by everyone's favorite inventor dude, Thomas Edison. His initial reasoning for inventing it was for things like business, hearing dolls speak, sing, cry, and the last words of dying persons. Because nothing gets my fingers snapping quite like hearing my grandma right before she got eaten by that gator. Even still, Edison knew that the device could eventually be used for recording music, and lo and behold, it was. Genres like opera and jazz were the first to benefit from the newly created music industry. But how were they recorded when microphones hadn't even been invented? Well, they were recorded using this thing. Musicians would crowd around it and the sound was captured onto a wax master. Engineers had to move performers around the room in order to capture the best balance. Before the idea of mixing even became a thing, balance was a key part of the recording process. But even though recorded music allowed audiences the chance to hear music without going to a live performance, the limited capacity of acoustic recording didn't necessarily mean it was better than a live performance. Wax cylinders favored heard music that was primarily in the mid-range of the frequency spectrum, so marine bands and male opera singers were A-okay, relatively. But anything else sounded like trash. Thankfully, with the invention and proliferation of electrical recording and microphones, more of the frequency spectrum was able to be captured, and thus more instruments could be accurately recorded. I should also mention that while recording gave musicians the opportunity to be heard by more people than ever before, the capabilities and even limitations of the medium impacted the music itself. Composers such as Bela Bartok and Percy Grainger, when they were looking for inspiration, would record folk songs from their region, trying to find every little fine detail they could. These recordings and the fine-tuning of performance they allowed for eventually inspired works like Bartok's Bagatelles or Grainger's Shallow Brown. In addition, a wax cylinder could only really hold 2 to 3 minutes of audio. Composers and arrangers had to edit down their songs to make sure that they would fit on a cylinder. In fact, it's possible that the idea of a 3-minute pop song originated just because that's what early recording mediums could hold. But alongside the performance itself, there was something else, something more implicit that a recording captured. In a word, that term comes from the PBS miniseries American Epic. It comes from the idea that when you record a song from a specific place, you're not only recording the song itself, you're also recording a piece of the place's culture. A sentiment that was echoed in Sonic Highways, the HBO miniseries documenting the Foo Fighters album of the same name.
This all started with one idea: that the environment in which you make a record ultimately influences the end result.
American Epic notes that when recording music first became an industry unto itself, it always came from a world of utmost professionalism. The music had to be made for, and able to be sold to, as large an audience as possible. However, when radio first came about in the 1920s and caused LP sales to dip, labels had to look to new areas for more unique artists to attract listeners. This led to musicians all across the country being able to record and hear themselves like never before.
Blackbird fly.
So even dating back to its origins, sound recording was and remains an intrinsic part of how we communicate musical ideas not only between ourselves as individuals, but also between different geographical regions and even different cultures. And the developments that have been made since only serve to help artists fulfill their creative vision. The shift in focus from singles to albums in the 60s gave artists the chance to create musical experiences that extended beyond the confines of a 3-minute song. The invention of multi-track recording coincides with bands like the Beatles and the Beach Boys using the format to add layers to records that are still considered classics today, such as Sgt. Pepper and the biggest boy of them all, Pet Sounds. The advent of digital recording and DAWs like Pro Tools pushed past that ceiling even further, with stuff like Beck's Odelay, Madonna's Like a Virgin, and the first digitally recorded album of them all, you all know it folks, Ry Cooper's Bop Till You Drop, The Big Muff. Do I even have to explain that one? But in 2018, does recorded music have any other additional purpose? Yes. Such as industry. As it turns out, musicians and engineers are people too, and need money to eat and live. A crazy idea, I know. And so the process of putting out a recorded piece of music requires talented people at every step.
Or promoting.
A record is a great way for artists to promote an upcoming tour, and a tour is a great way for artists to connect with fans, see the world, and make that money. A recent report found that in 4 years, the live music industry will be worth Yep, the live music industry is absolutely booming, and there are plenty of venues and especially festivals out there capitalizing on it.
External narrative.
This one's a little bit more niche than the other points, but considering some recent projects that have come out, I should still probably mention it. Sometimes artists will release songs or albums that comment on their own personal lives, or at least what we believe their personal lives to be. This can reinforce a narrative and ultimately help keep the artist and project in the spotlight for longer. I talked at great length about Robin Thicke's failed narrative album Paula earlier this year, but there are albums like Beyonce's Lemonade, Jay-Z's 444, Kanye's last 2 albums, and some of Ariana Grande's recent output, specifically Thank You Next. And to be clear, I'm not saying that these artists are lying about their personal lives or just putting these songs out there just for publicity. There's no real evidence to suggest that. It's really just a quality of a culture dominated by social media and instant connection with artists, and some artists use that quality to great success. So there you have it. That's why I think we record music. This isn't definitive by any means, so if there's something you think I missed, let me know in the comments down below. I really enjoy dissecting music and recordings and why they work, and I hope you all enjoy watching me do it. So please lift your collecting horns to the air as we celebrate this weird practice of capturing wiggly air and trying to make meaning from it. Thanks for watching. Oh, hey, you might be curious about that bit from earlier when I said that this was the last real case study of the year, which it is. So you might ask, what am I doing for the rest of the year? Well, first, quick reviews will still be happening, so new quick review bashru next week. The week after, I'll be doing an award ceremony for albums and songs, or even moments of songs that I feel deserve recognition. It's kind of hard to describe. You'll get it when you see it. Finally, in lieu of a real case study next month, I'll be doing my top 10 albums of 2018. Once that video's out, I'll be taking a break for the rest of the holiday season, and I'll be back sometime in early 2019. So yeah, back, you can go back to the end card.